gonna start on login and authentication. Today's the first day of 5, where we're gonna show you some of the cool stuff that happens with game dev, what I call game dev ROI, which is the return of an investment. If you have questions, I will not go over everything, so make sure to comment below. Tell me what you're interested in. If you want me to go through like a Steam login, I have that. I have other things I can talk about, but I'm going to keep it simple. Okay. I already did all the downloading so that you don't have to wait for that. I did for the back end. I'll do PlayFab for the multiplayer stuff. Fusion 2 platform SDK is Meta. Okay. And URP template and namespace. I got to show you the namespace first. Okay. So I'm going to show you what I do. You probably know this, but in the settings in Unity, you go up here, project settings, editor up here. You can put your root namespace so that when you create scripts for the first time, it'll add that namespace. It's nice to organize that so that you know, okay, your stuff. Because sometimes you'll have a game manager, and game manager is very generic. And so if you have it under your namespace, you know that that's your game manager, not some other asset. But I have the fader. That fader I got from Photon Fusion, one of the assets, and I saved it to my folders. So here's my company folder. I do _jgonza, and then I structure everything underneath this. So I have my company assets, and in there I have local and multiplayer. The reason I do that is so that I can just export that specific folder if I want to extract the specific multiplayer out of it, or not use this multiplayer setup versus the other one. It just makes it a lot easier to separate certain code so that you're not tangled up with code that you don't want to use. Okay, and the other. Okay, so let's go. This is basically everything. Just one script that does everything. I've done loading where you have to follow the single responsibility principle, had multiple scripts, and each one did something specific, right? Like display, like login display, then you have the login controller, and then you had meta login, Steam login, and communicating back and forth, and it gets really tedious. So this is how I learned to do it now. It's not the best, it's just what works for me. And I wanted to share it with you. If you have questions, leave comments below, because I'm not going to go over everything, but I'm going to kind of briefly show you why I like this setup. So a high overview. So I have these regions, meta authentication and PlayFab login. If I had Steam authentication, I would have it here too, and it would just branch out, right, with these statements. You can set these up yourself, so you can add a Steam one, Pico, Android, Apple, whatever you want, and you can just branch off, right? And then so they branch out for their authentication, and then they come back to log in on the back end of PlayFab. It's as simple as that. And then you launch the scene. That's all it is, right? Super simple. But then it gets, the devil's in the details. So I can't do the entitlement check in the editor, so I split it. I have this dev account scriptable object that has some dummy data to just recreate the setup, right? So I just need a display name and a unique ID. So this is really good when you have multiple developers on the account. They can create their own thing, and then they can test it. So you can still test it in the editor, knowing that these are just dummies. Okay, and then meta authentication. This is required by Meta, and it's actually really good to get in the habit of doing these. Don't wait till the end to do it, because these save you a lot of time, especially in VR. I've seen a lot of games in VR that have the raycast and the user information, and you have to text, to type, all these stuff. I'm going to tell you right now, it's friction, adds friction to have to type your own name, and it adds a lot of complexity for developers, because you have to check it, you have to validate, make sure it doesn't have swear words, yada yada. And then if you want them to be able to change it later, you have to figure out how you're going to identify each player. And Meta requires you to do a reporting system. If you use theirs, you have to make sure that you stay with the Meta IDs, because that's how the report system works. Okay, so if you don't use Meta's username, you have to do your own reporting system, which is a pain. Again, to keep things simple, I just use their username they chose to have on Meta, and that's it. It just saves you hours of work. So there's a tip already that saves you. And then once you're done, you get the user information and you save it. I like to save it in the game manager. The game manager, I like to save information that, especially in multiplayer games, information that I don't care if the player access, because it's not going to harm other players. It's just them, right? They might change their display name, but it's not constant because it's going to download it. And so there's no point for them to use it. Because the leaderboard is going to use the real username, so it's not there. So it's just doing more harm to them than anything. User proof. And so in here, this is important because even if you, let's say you're not, this is Fusion. There's the only line of code for Fusion is to authenticate. Another line of defense for hackers is that Fusion allows you to authenticate. Unity has an authentication system too for Meta, and you do the same thing. So you can just replace this with the Unity version if you're authenticating with using Unity's new system. Okay, so pretty straightforward. This is all documented on Meta. Do you need to do this? And if not, you have to quit the app because that means someone's either sideloading your game outside the store, right? Or something else. And so it prevents spamming. Okay, log in with custom ID. There's no plugin for PlayFab to automatically log in with Meta, but Unity does have. So if you'd like to see that, I can go do a video just on Unity's login system with Meta. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. PlayFab. I really like this newly created. It's a good way to check if this is the first time the player's logging in. You can do other stats. And then the last thing I like to do is these errors. These errors I've seen because of my own experience. We've had to ban players, and so we check if players are banned and tell them to go to Discord or email us if they need to unban for some reason. If PlayFab is not working, we do these error codes because sometimes PlayFab shuts down, and so I like to check for that and allow them to play. It just, I gotta warn them that their stuff is not going to be saved. And this is a VRC check for Meta, is you need to make sure that if it's a multiplayer game, they need internet. And if they don't have internet, you got to tell them. Okay, so VRC checks right there. And then we set the display name and we launch the game. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. I don't have to check dependencies back and forth between different scripts. Pretty simple. If you have any questions specifically about this setup that you want to dive deeper in, I can do that. I hope this makes sense. I'm going to hit play now, and if it lets me show you kind of what it looks like. It's going to be super fast, but welcome, done, right? It has a version ID and it has the fader. And tomorrow I'm going to show you Fusion 2 in VR with a player, and I'll show you the setup for a player display name, and in here it'll do the fade out and you'll be in a scene with a player display name. Super easy, but this saves me time because now I can use the script to do loading for any game I want. And if I would need to add Android or Google Play, I can do that, and then I'll have it for the rest of my life because that doesn't change. Login is like universal, and the simpler it is, the better, right? I have a login. No one has to type a single thing. They just get in and play. That's it. Okay. So if you like it, please leave a like, subscribe. If you really want to help me out, please tell other devs. I really want to help everyone get their game finished and be efficient. Remember, this is a return of an investment. So let's get working. Let's finish our games. See you tomorrow.